Okay, good morning and welcome to our meeting today to talk about strikes and going for gold. Can I just ask anybody who's not muted, if you could just mute now then please, because we are recording this. So we've got two great speakers today. We've got Louise from the NEU and Bryan from UCU. So Louise, I'd like to introduce you to start with. You're a teacher, you've been a counsellor based in Carlisle, so in the outer reaches of our North region, and you've just started your official term as NEU National President. So welcome. Perhaps you can talk to us please about what's going on in schools, because schools are about to be balloted, and in FE the ballot has started this week.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for that introduction as well. And it's good to see some familiar faces here as well as I've logged in today. Yeah, so we, National Education Union, currently running a number of different indicative ballots around pay and funding, crucially. Our sixth form college teachers has just closed on the 30th of September, and we will be going to a formal ballot with that group of membership. And then we've got support staff and teachers in England and Wales are also being balloted around pay. They started on slightly different timescales, but they'll both close on the 14th of October. And we will meet the threshold on those, and we will be going to formal ballot on those ones as well. The teachers' indicative ballot in particular, the strength of feeling has been massive. We really carefully tested all of our systems before we went live. We were expecting big numbers, we built up to it, we really pushed it, but the system crashed, you may know, at 10:30 on the Saturday when it opened, and that was, you know, we were expecting big numbers, but we weren't expecting everybody literally to be sitting there waiting at the minute that it opened to be clicking to say yes, you know, we want to go to strike action. And I think that just speaks really about the strength of feeling from our members. In the build up to that, what has been really important, I think, and really useful to us is we had quite a lot of data from a SACS boycott ballot that we did a couple of years ago, and we used that data really carefully. We broke it down by region, by district. We shared that information widely and then encouraged all of our local reps to use that information to target which schools that they were going in to speak to members. And we've really pushed for reps meetings in every workplace we can possibly get them in, but also targeting them where we've got larger density of membership as well. Within our rule at the NEU, we have to have an indicative ballot before we go to formal ballot, but we've used that carefully as well. So question number 4 in our indicative ballot at the moment is basically, it's your details. Is your workplace, your phone number, your email, are these correct? Yes or no? If they're not correct, you get taken to where you can address those and make sure they're right, because, you know, we know that we expect to lose around 10% when we go to a formal ballot through the post. We're aiming for 65 in our indicative, so we're making sure that everybody's clearing up their own personal information as well. And we also have a data dashboard, which is, it's really, I find it really exciting. It's all lit up in nice colours, but each rep can access their workplace and they can see each member in their workplace. And once the member's voted, they can then select to say, yes, I will inform my rep that I've voted, and the rep can see as each member's voting, and then they can also input on there when they've had a conversation with those members as well. It can be a little bit clunky, it can be a little bit, you know, behind what people are telling us on the ground, but what we're saying to people is use it as part of the tool, use it as part of your armour. You know better in the workplace what your members are doing and what your members are saying. If you can use that data, then do. But we as a union really are throwing absolutely everything at this, because we really know and feel that we absolutely have to get this right. We must win this. Our argument is around funding, and it is around our pay. Now, we survey our members annually, and repeatedly what has come up has been its workload has been the biggest issue for them. Workload has been what's causing people to leave the profession. But in the last couple of surveys, pay has been up there along with workload. So our claim in this action is around our pay, obviously, but it is also around funding for education widely. We know that the cost of living crisis at the moment is, you know, it's some of it is out of the government's hands, but it's on the back of 10 years of serious underfunding for education wider, which we all know. But our messages are really, really clear in this campaign. Teachers have lost 20% in real terms since 2010 in their pay. I know the impact that's had in me and my two children. Support staff have lost even more, 27% for support staff. And that is just completely unsustainable. Schools are underfunded. Energy bills are going to be a real issue for schools as well. So we are saying that these must be fully funded pay rises as well. That's really important to the wider campaign, and to ensuring that we get wider support, that these are fully funded as well. People's experience of education, I think, is changing, and people are seeing the impacts of the complete stripping out of all funding for education. So we really need to build on that as well with the wider public as well. The thresholds, as we know, are really hard to beat. We're looking at the CWU, and I will come on to some of the issues their actions have caused us as well briefly in a minute. But they've got 1,500 workplaces, which we work out as an average of 77 members per workplace. At the NEU, we've got twice as many members in England alone, and we've got many more workplaces. Instead of 1,500, we've got 22,000 workplaces. So that's an average of 11 members in each workplace, which is why our reps on the ground are so important. And similarly, around the COVID, when we had COVID reps, we've asked people to step up and be ballot volunteers. And we've got nearly 30,000 members who have volunteered to be ballot volunteers in this campaign going forward. So our next step now is to make sure we're engaging those, we're training those up, we're giving them access to the data as we can within GDPR regulations, but enabling them to work effectively as well. So we're really keen as well, and being really careful to match up our professional staff and our activists on the ground. So we've got we've just agreed at our recent executive meeting that we're going to make sure that we have meetings with each executive member and each organiser within the regions, and they're going to talk specifically about what they can do within their region based on the data that they've got there to maximise turnout, and how executive members and local officers and regional staff can work together to ensure and target where they're putting that work as well. So I will just finish very briefly talking about the timing of our formal ballots, and obviously CWU taking action, and absolutely fully support that action and want to send solidarity out at every opportunity I can to CWU, but it's caused us issues, and it is going to cause us issues going forward. So obviously, since that was announced, we have had meeting after meeting after meeting at various levels to try and work out when is the best time to open our formal ballot during a time when our members may not be able to use the postal service. I got to chair my first executive meeting on Thursday. We have 76 executive members, and it was a big decision to make. And I just kept thinking, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but we have to get this right. We cannot fail when we go to this formal ballot. If we pass the thresholds and we go to formal action, we will be the biggest union to do so in this round of, you know, this wider move from the movement. So I really do feel the weight of that on our shoulders. We're also considering our sister unions as well. We would like to align our ballot period with the NASUWT if possible. We're doing everything we can to sort of work along that as well. So we have got an answer. I can't give you the answer at the moment, but we will be going to a formal ballot at some point very soon. And we are all ready to do it. And I'd appreciate any comments and questions of how we can work together to be successful in that. I hope that was useful, and thanks for having me along to speak. Thanks, Anya.
Thanks, Louise. Just before I go to John, you said about getting the public on board and the importance of that. And I was just thinking as you were speaking about the university strikes for the last few years. We've had some huge industrial action on university campuses. And a lot of that brought in big support from students, but it also brought in criticism from parents and other people about student education being disrupted. How will you answer questions from parents and the public about disruptions to the school day?
It's a really difficult question, because I think as educators we all care. Nobody gets into education or into the profession for not because they don't care about the pupils and the families that they serve. But I think the answer is we can't not, that children and young people's educations are being disrupted, and they have been disrupted by years and years of underfunding. You know, my own son has just started a foundation degree, and he was at college prior to that, and I saw the different tutors that he had coming and going. They're on short-term contracts, they're not, you know, their paying conditions is not what it should be, and that's impacted his education. If you look at secondary education, I'm a governor in a secondary school, we're struggling to appoint staff, we're struggling to appoint, you know, everybody wants good quality educators in front of the class, and in order to have that we have to pay them appropriately, and we are taking this action because we have a recruitment and retention crisis across the whole sector. Nobody wants to strike, it's a last resort, would be my answer.
Okay, thank you, Louise. John, can I just introduce you now then, please? John, you are a former sociology teacher, you used to teach at Newcastle College in the sixth form there, and you've been working as UCU Regional Support Officer in the Northern region for a number of years now. So please could you talk to us about the strikes that are building up across colleges across the country, please?
Yeah, thanks, Anya, and thanks very much for inviting us on here. I want to, if I can, just kind of take a little bit of a historical kind of look at this. I'm not going to go back hundreds of years, but I am going to go back 20. And the reason I'm doing that is because the title of this is Digging for Gold. And obviously one of the things that trade unionists and activists and socialists are always trying to look at is like, there's no magic kind of solution to this, but what are the sorts of things that we can do to either, you know, get more power in the workplace, to take industrial action and to get the results that we want. And I just wanted to kind of look back at what happened in NATFE and in UCU and FE colleges, you know, 20 years ago at the start of the noughties. So what tended to happen there, so colleges are all kind of independent bodies. They've all got their own, you know, governors. They're not controlled by the local authority at all. And any kind of pay discussions that are had on a national basis are never binding. It's always just a recommendation that's made. What we saw kind of at the start of the noughties was a kind of decline in the number of colleges that would implement the pay offer that was made, or the pay offer that was agreed. And we had a kind of series of 1 or 2 day strikes that the union took, and occasionally, you know, would be offered 2%, we'd have 1 day's national strike, and, you know, then that would get raised to maybe 2.5% or maybe 0.5% later in the year. So we would always get something from that. Now, obviously, one of the difficulties of that strategy was it didn't necessarily engage all of the membership. And, you know, we've now got the Trade Union Act to kind of deal with, where you have to get 50% of people turning up in the ballot and actually voting. Now, we didn't really get that. And there was no, and, you know, while I'm not in favour of the Trade Union Act of 2016, which introduced that kind of anti-union legislation, one of the things that it does force you to do is do things very, very differently to how we've done in the past. And it does kind of force you to take a different look and a more kind of strategic look about how you deliver industrial action. Because, as I said at the start of the noughties, we were quite used to kind of doing that, having a national ballot, 1 day or maybe 2 days of action. It was patchy across the piece, and we didn't really, you know, get huge results out of it. But one of the things that we did get is we got a small kind of percentage increase as a result of that. Now, what kind of happened is that we then really got to a position where actually that wasn't working, you know. So either they would, and there was 1 year, and I can't remember which year it was, but there was 1 year when the national recommendation from the Association of Colleges was to implement a 0% pay offer. Well, that was very easy for them to implement, and they got 100% implementation. But clearly that left us thinking, well, what do we do at each individual college to try and get that to try and get something better. And you know, some of the better colleges where either management were more kind of more friendly to us, or where we had strong branches, we clearly got, you know, a payoff at above 0%. But I'm kind of going back to that because, you know, some of the things that we did then we can't really do now. And it's not that they were failed strategies. I think at the time there were strategies and tactics that we adopted which fitted in at the time. But you really kind of have to kind of, you know, assess every kind of stage that you're at in order to think, well, what can we actually do here? So one of the things that we did we had a manifesto for further education. We've now got a kind of the hashtag that we're using at the moment is respect FE. And if you go on Twitter or social media, you'll see hopefully, you know, that hashtag being used by ourselves and by students and by, you know, supporters of the action that we're taking, because we wanted to say, well, actually, FE doesn't get the funding that it deserves. You know, FE educators don't get the respect that they deserve, and that's something that kind of we use to cohere people around as a strategy. Now, this week and last week, there's been, so to kind of jump ahead to where we are today, this week and last week and this coming week, I think there's now 26 colleges which are taking action. Now, that's clearly a minority of colleges, but the reason we've got those colleges out is because that's where we've got a decent number of members and where those members have said that they're prepared to take action. So just to kind of link in with some of the things that Louise was talking about, because Louise talked about the importance of checking your details and making sure that members have an up-to-date email address, have a home address, you know, and an up-to-date home address on their membership, you know, details. And I'm not sure what it's like in schools, but definitely in universities where we cover, and less so colleges, but we had a number of people who had their workplace address as the address where they got union mail. Now, clearly, and for some years, we've tried to kind of get people out of that, you know, change it and what have you. Obviously, during, you know, the COVID shutdowns, people were kind of had to do that. Otherwise, they just weren't going to get any communication, you know, through the post. So that kind of checking your details, it sounds really, really boring, you know, but actually it's a sort of essential stuff that needs to be done. And you know, someone always told me there's a difference to being organized as a union or as the union branch and being militant. You know, so you can be militant and you can have all this kind of political stuff and say, yeah, we're, you know, down with this and down with that and whatever. But if you're not doing the basics of checking your membership details and that sort of boring stuff, you know, then, you know, you're just not going to be able to kind of deliver any action. So we had, and obviously the way in which we're forced to do things now is through the Trade Union Act and the need to kind of get 50% turnout in a ballot. And, you know, as Louise indicated in terms of what the NEU have been doing, you know, we've done that kind of similar process as well. And clearly we can communicate via email, you know, with our members, but we can't do the kind of full industrial action ballot by email. That has to be done, you know, through the post, as I think people will know. And despite the fact that the TUC have for some time now pushed, you know, about getting that as an electronic thing rather than it being postal, but that's clearly something that is going to be a far longer term kind of shift. So we are where we are with that, and that's meant that so one of the things we do is we do indicative ballots, and that's one of the things that we did, you know, across the entire union. And then from those, you know, we got a certain percentage getting over 50%, you know, in an email ballot, and others who were getting close, you know, 35, 45, you know, percent, you know, turnout. As Louise said, you're always going to get dropout with that, you know, or there's a tendency. I mean, you know, I don't want to kind of be too deterministic about these things, but you know, if you're at 25%, you're miles away. You know, if you're at 48%, you're close, but it's very, you know, you've still got to kind of get over that line and get the 50% turnout. So the union took the decision to ballot the colleges where we thought we could win, and where we thought that we could, you know, get, you know, turnout of over 50%. And I think there was 30, to be honest, I forget whether we are, I think 26 colleges are taking action at the moment, but I think there was over 31, I think, who actually got over the initial, you know, threshold. So a minority of colleges, but clearly one of the things that's good is it kind of sets a beacon for others as well. And we're finding now that other branches are kind of saying, oh, well, you know, it would be nice to be a part of that. And clearly, you've got to demonstrate that you've got the membership support for that. And that's great if you can do that. But it's kind of getting, you know, we have to kind of deal with where we are in terms of the legal process. But also that means that we have to talk to members, we have to get them involved, and we have to communicate with them. And that's one of the things that it's forced us to do, something which is probably a little bit different than has traditionally happened in the past, I might suggest. The other, just to talk about some of the other things that we've done, and Anya mentioned about some of the university strike action that we've had. And you know, so there's something called through text, which is you have to pay for the service. I've not used it myself, but it's a peer-to-peer texting service. You basically do it online, and if you've got the mobile phone number of a member, then you know you can do quite a few in a short period of time, I understand. And it's a way of, you know, texting and saying, have you voted? If not, you know, do you need a new ballot paper? This is where you click here in order to get a replacement ballot paper. And so that kind of technology, you know, that is available, we have to use it in order to try and increase, you know, the turnout. We've used it successfully in higher education. We've used it a bit in further education as well. And it's one of those tools that you can use. The TUC, I think, have done it. I think there's something online that you can watch about how to do it. But it is one of those things that we can use to try and, you know, get the vote out. I mean, we actually say GTVO, get the vote out, is a kind of, you know, shorthand for this sort of campaigning. The other thing that I'll just mention is there's a difference between aggregating and disaggregating. Now, what I mean by that is that, so, you know, back to the noughties, if you like, what we used to do, all the colleges, you know, together, we used to ballot all of our membership, and you were allowed to do this. It was perfectly legitimate to do it within the legislation. You'd ballot all of the colleges, and you just add them all up and see, you know, see what the turnout was, see whether people voted yes or no. And obviously, you know, what used to happen was you'd get a yes vote for action. Now that was aggregating everyone together. And one of the things that we've done, and we've changed how we've done this depending on the situation, is we've done what's called disaggregation. So we've done it on the basis of institution by institution. So we did it in higher education. So rather than getting all of the universities, every university was balloted individually. And so that meant that even though you might not have had 50% of the entire membership, you know, voting, that where you had 55% or 65% in individual institutions, you were able to bring those institutions out on industrial action. And that's one of the things that we've done with colleges this time, is we've done it on an individual basis. One of the unusual things about an organisation like NCG, Newcastle College Group, is that obviously we've brought all those together in one ballot, and we've had people out at Newcastle, Carlisle, Southwark, Lewisham, and West Lancs College, because there's various different colleges which kind of make up that, but we've dealt with it as one employer. I think I'll stop there, Anya, because I've no idea how long I've talked for, but I'll possibly talk long enough. But I think the thing that I just wanted to emphasise was that, and the reason I wanted to go back a bit, is that there are different ways that you tackle things, and you very much have to look at where you are, look at what you can do within the legislation, and make a judgment call. And I just very much kind of agree with what Louise said about doing your best to get this right. Now, you can get this wrong, but you know, we always try and get it right. And clearly what you want to do is you want to try and deliver action first of all, and then that's difficult enough, but then you need to deliver an outcome for that action as well, because if you don't, then you do get yourself into a difficult position, because then you think, well, what's our exit strategy? What might we accept? And in the past, I think, you know, some of the things that we've tried to look for is, you know, maybe changes in workload or changes in holidays. But because pay is such a crucial issue at this moment in time, that's definitely the one thing that we are going for and trying to kind of crack if we can. Thanks, Anya.
That's great, John. Thank you. So I'd like to open up the room for questions. Ian, I know that you've got one because you've had your hand up already.
Yes, thanks very much, Anya. Those are both very interesting presentations. My trade union is Unite, and we've got 1.1 million members, they tell me. And I was at a regional conference of my union last week, and our Assistant General Secretary addressed us and pointed out that next year, next June, we will be balloted under the law as to whether or not we want to retain our political fund. And she quite rightly pointed out the importance of retaining that fund and having sufficient threshold and turnout to ensure that we did retain it, because of course if we lose it legally we wouldn't be able to campaign against the government. And of course we're going to have to use a postal ballot. We know what that's about. As John had indicated, it's about using up unnecessarily trade union funds so they can't function properly. And of course Liz Truss, who's the most frightening person I've come across in politics in all the years I've been involved, said quite recently, didn't she, that the government was faced with a coalition against growth. And there was a list of organisations, including the Scottish Nationals, the Labour Party, environmentalists, but more importantly, from our point of view, trade unions. And they've signalled well in advance they're going to make it more difficult for trade unions in the future. And I'm interested in the solidarity point, which I think Louise picked up on in terms of connection with the CWU. We know as a consequence of anti-trade union legislation introduced by the Tories, we can't have secondary action, which I think is wrong and improper. But we need to build up, it seems to me, supporting mechanisms between trade unions that are actually taking an industrial action and seeing which ways they can circumvent the law. It's hugely disappointing to me that Tony Blair and more recently Keir Starmer have indicated they would move against the anti-trade union laws, but of course they haven't. And only this week, the current leader of the Labour Party was interviewed on a radio programme, and it was recorded in The Guardian, so it must be true, as saying that he wasn't ideological, he was practical. And my response to that is, well, what's he in a political party for then, if he's just going to be practical? Because what we are about is ideology and on our own programme. And in fact, when he was elected leader of the Labour Party, Keir put forward his 10-point plan about what he would do. And one of them was supporting trade unions. Well, I've never heard him say that. What I have heard him say, and he said on the radio programme this week, was that he wouldn't appear on a picket line. I mean, he just reiterated the point we all know and understand, and I'm disappointed with, and I'm sure you will be. Because he said it isn't the thing that a leader of the Labour Party should do. Well, come on, I think, yes, he should. He should be on the picket line of the trade unions that we heard about today that they're intending to take industrial action. And just one final point, if I may, because this is a huge, huge issue. I think John's right when he said that, and Louise, just one final thing. We know what the government's priorities are in terms of education. Well, first of all, it's to keep the working class in the place, but that goes without saying. But they're going to accelerate the enforced academisation, aren't they? And take it away from local people and hand it over to their mates in the private sector, which is what they've been doing. And also, of course, now they're bringing back grammar schools. So we know what the direction is. And alongside that, as I've tried to say, they're going to attack the trade unions as well, because it's all our fault. Well, after the Russians, that is. So I'm not sure if there's a question there, but it's my comment. Thank you.
All right, Louise, did you want to pick up on any of the things that Ian was saying there?
Yes, I'd love to, if that's okay. Thanks very much, Ian. Yeah, I completely agree about the political fund. It is so important. I've just come back from the party conferences. I got to go to Labour and to go to the Tories, which I've done previously, but this year was an experience beyond an experience. To watch them close hand imploding was quite a pleasure, I will be honest. But I had some really, really interesting conversations with members. A lot of them are school governors or local councillors, and the forced academisation with what's in the schools bill, I did not speak to a single one that agreed with that, and that's a genuine. And I kept saying to them, well, why is your party pushing this through if you can see the dangers of it? And you know, they don't operate democratically. I didn't realise before I went last year, they don't have any motions or anything at their conference. They just don't. So the members were going, well, if it's coming from above, then we have to agree with it. I'm like, is that how it works? So I was encouraging them to go back to their MP and to campaign. And you may be aware that NEU has a councillors network, which we give out briefings and we sign up councillors from all parties. So we're going to survey our Tory councillors so that we've got some message to come out of, actually this is what Tory members think about what's in that schools bill around academisation. And some of the conversations I had around grammar schools with them, I can't even repeat them. I completely agree with you about sort of the Labour Party as well. I don't really have any words about Keir and his 10 pledges. And he sailed us, you know, not just what he's doing around taking action. The Labour Party did not support us in our fight around safety, around COVID. And I found that very hard at the time, and I'm still finding it very difficult as a Labour councillor. The lack of filling that pledge to support trade unions and stand shoulder to shoulder is pretty depressing, you know. And it's important. Our campaigning as a union around school funding in the general election in 2017 turned many voters to Labour. So political campaigning and standing alongside political parties for the trade union movement is important. And just about linking action as well, I think there is a real move through the TUC, through the larger unions to try and coordinate to link action up. And just, you know, a couple of organisations, Strike Map, we've as the national union have affiliated nationally to Strike Map, and we're encouraging all of our districts as well to affiliate as districts to Strike Map. But that's a way that we can offer solidarity across the movement. And, you know, things like Enough is Enough, fantastic rallies across the movement as well. And we've got our local district and branch secretaries conference coming up, and we're bringing a broad selection of speakers from different unions to come and talk about their fight and their action, because we've got a lot to learn from each other. I've really enjoyed listening to John. You know, there's a couple of notes there I've made from what John said about what I can go and take away and have a look at that we can use as well. So it is really important. We need to work together to win this fight, but I've no doubt that we will if we can work together. But thanks for your contribution, Ian. I've really enjoyed what you were saying.
In response to what you're saying about the trade unions, and I don't know whether John wants to come in here. I was at an event the night before education unions, but the idea that someone can go to school, can go to university, can read a few books and then talk about industrial action when you're dealing with working people, he seemed to think that that was a problem. Now, I would be concerned that it wasn't recognised that actually all of these fights are linked, that there isn't actually a distinction between them. And I don't know whether, John, you wanted to come in on that, or Louise.
Yeah, I'll say something, Anya. I mean, one of the things that always strikes me is it's not just that disputes are linked, but actually we're all linked in different ways. So I'm chair of governors at a local primary school, and I'm on the NEU's governor network thingy, or whatever that is. So I know that the NEU from time to time email out governors and say this is what's going on, or this is what you need to know. You know, and I think, you know, doing things like that is actually, you know, quite important. I mean, the postie who delivers to us here is the shop steward for the area. You know, now I didn't know that until I kind of started speaking to him. But it's about kind of, you know, everyone's connected in one different way, and one of his kids goes to the college. You know, so, you know, there are all these things which are linked up, and the more that we can do it, and the more that we can link up and kind of brief people, if you like, on things, you know, the better. So stuff like academisation is always kind of, you know, comes up, and it has done, you know, for the past few years. I mean, it's difficult to see, you know, the government kind of getting hold of anything at the moment, but clearly at some point, you know, when stuff like that is pushed through, people need to know, well, what are the questions that we need to ask? What are the sorts of things that we need to talk about? You know, what are the relationships that me as a governor, you know, has to have with the staff unions, things like that. So I think the more that we can do that, the better. Actually, the one other thing I was going to say, because someone, I think it was you, Anya, you know, asked a question about parents and students and what have you, and that student groups were quite kind of well, they were active and vocal if they supported the strike in universities, and active and vocal if they didn't. And some of the students took out legal action and said, you know, we want a refund of fees and all this sort of stuff. And actually, I mean, I don't know what our official union line on that was, but I actually would think that was a good thing to be doing, because you want students to say, well, you're the management, you're the university, you're the employer, you're supposed to deliver a service. If that's the way that education is picked up by people, then, you know, we need to kind of get them to kind of put as much pressure as possible, you know, on those sorts of things. And if you can, and it is always difficult to do, but if you know, there's things like what they call the Taxpayers Alliance, you know, which supposedly kind of acts in favour of all of taxpayers. Now, I don't know if they ever kind of do any surveys of taxpayers, you know, or if it's just the sort of thing that interests them. Or Parents Against the Strike, you know, stuff like that. Commuters, you know, against the strike. If you can try and set up, and obviously it's difficult to do it, but you have to try and persuade other people to do it rather than you do it yourself. If you can get parents in favour of more funding, or parents in favour of the strike, or students for strike action, groups like that, you know, I mean, it's about kind of, you know, in kind of trade union organising terms, they talk about inoculation, you know, preparing people for the fights ahead, so that if you can get people on side before you actually take action, then that's always very helpful. One of the things, I'll finish on this, Anya. So I used to work at Newcastle College, as you mentioned, and on 2 separate occasions, the principal there took the decision to dismiss all of the staff and to re-engage them on new contracts. Now, it was incredibly helpful that one of the journalists at the Chronicle at the time was very good friends with someone whose parents both worked there. And that was really, really helpful in terms of getting the kind of message across and getting someone on board. And all of these, you know, like they were in the NUJ as well. The more connections that you can get with people like that, and sometimes you hit lucky, and we did hit lucky with that. You know, we didn't know that the person who kind of covered that, you know, had such kind of close bonds with people who were directly impacted by it. But the more that you can do that, and the more you can build on that, the better. And that's why organizations and discussions like this are good, because at least you can kind of share experiences and find out, you know, who's what and who's where. So thanks, Anya.
Thank you. Simon.
Hello. Yeah, my unions unite as well, same as Ian, and I think it's not unconnected that you know, that Sharon Graham got elected on the basis of, you know, her organising approach, and that she was going to take the fight to the employers, because I think there has been a sea change, and I think people they're not expecting the Labour Party to come and solve their problems, and that's a real problem for the Labour Party. But it's evident that you know, the leadership of the Labour Party are not going to get on our side, and in some respects, if they remain neutral, then that's probably the best that we can hope for. Because if we can organise ourselves, and I'm talking from a trade union point of view here, if we can organise ourselves, we don't need the Labour Party. And I think the last 6 months have shown that increasingly, as Sharon Graham said, the Labour Party is becoming an irrelevance within the working class, and that's a real problem. And as we are obviously here as SEA, part of the Labour Party, that's the question that that I was wanted to pose to both of you: is that what do you see as the future for the relationship between the Labour Party and organised labour, and what would you want from the Labour Party and want from SEA in terms of what can we do to help?
Great question. John, do you want to pick that up first?
I can go first if you like. I think I don't know if people have seen, you know, I know Mick Lynch is always on television, and he's always talking about the strikes and what have you. And this morning, I don't know what programme he was on, but I've seen a clip that's been circulated on Twitter where some people might have seen it, but where he's asked the question, well, this is just a political strike, isn't it? And he says, what are you talking about? This isn't a political strike. It's a basic strike, you know, where men and women are taking action to try and get a better pay deal and to protect jobs. That's what it's about. And then he's asked a question about, well, you want to bring down the Tory government. He says, well, when have we ever said that as a demand? And clearly, you know, those aren't the kind of basic demands that as a trade union, well, for a start, you can't have a trade dispute and, you know, take action against the government per se like that. You know, clearly you build around particular kind of standard trade union issues. Now, UCU, the union that, I mean, like other people, I'm a member of Unite, but UCU is the trade union that I work for. And we've never had an affiliation with the Labour Party at all. I mean, we've got a political fund. Every time we get asked about it, members vote to have that political fund and to do the sort of political campaigning. In terms of what you'd want from any government, I think, you know, you'd want them to change the legislation that restricts us from taking industrial action. Now, that's clearly not going to happen under a Conservative government, because the way that Liz Truss has been talking is that she's been talking about making it far more difficult for people to take industrial action. Whether or not that's going to happen under a Labour government, well, I can't recall exactly what it was that the Blair government did to kind of reform trade union legislation. It may well have done. I might have missed some of it, so apologies if they did. But that's not been a clear kind of manifesto commitment of the Labour Party. So I think regardless of which political party is in power, you're still going to be having, you know, the sorts of industrial disputes that we've got. I started working for the union in 2009, and, you know, that was when the Labour cuts were happening in colleges, and where we had, you know, thousands of people getting made redundant in that particular, and that was my kind of first introduction to working full time for the union. So I don't have a particular kind of hope or wish for the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, just that they do things better. I think organising Labour, and Labour as in, you know, workers and the people that we represent, and we represent people all the way up to, you know, the kind of professor level in university. Organising them and getting recognition for them as well, you know, because we don't have that for all professors around the country, but getting a trade union recognition agreement that involves everyone. I think they're the sorts of things that I think are important. I tend to kind of stay away from, you know, what the Labour Party should or shouldn't be doing, but clearly anything that they did to make things easy for trade unions to organise would be far better than what we've got at the moment.
Thank you. Louise, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thanks, Anya. Yeah, briefly. Yeah, a bit like John, I'm not sure I have any impact on what I could say, what I want from the Labour Party, but certainly more than we're getting at the moment. I think support, and as Ian mentioned, the 10 pledge to stand shoulder to shoulder with the trade union movement. I'm looking round as we're all approaching these fights and wondering where they are, to be totally frank. You know, the trade union legislation that may be coming down the road, we have to fight and resist at all costs, and we will need the political party of the Labour Party to help us in that fight. But as John said, you know, we're taking on the fights around pay and conditions as a trade union movement ourselves. Although I am saying I want to see more from the Labour Party, but also I can't help but think about the stark difference, having spent days at the Tory party conference and listening to their views on education, listening to what they think educators. I mean, I went to one of the most horrific fringes around should we be teaching about anti-racism within education, and listening to their opinions around those. I can't help but, you know, remind myself of the stark difference of what we are facing. So yes, I want much more from the Labour Party, but we as a movement also, I think, need to be in some ways supporting the Labour Party as a stark difference to what we've got in government at the moment. We at the National Education Union working really closely with both Bridget Phillipson and Stephen Morgan around their manifesto for education, because I think that's lacking as well at the moment. What proposals do the Labour Party have for education as well. But support from SEA, we had great support at the Labour Party conference around emergency motion. We've got a campaign at the moment around free school meals. We're asking for all children in primary school, and that was included as part of an emergency motion, which we were really, really grateful to have the support there. And I think following on for that, we've got some Labour MPs who are signing up to our open letter to call for that demand. We know that they announced breakfast clubs, but we know that they need to go further as we're facing this cost of living crisis. And I think I will just add one more thing as well. I think we, as education unions as well, we need to be thinking about education into the future and how trade unions and education and industry are all going to work together to have a green jobs revolution as well going forward. And I think the Labour Party need to be louder and stronger about that. How are we going to work together to provide the future that we should do for the children and young people that we're working with at the moment?
Thanks, Louise. Eileen's just put a question in the chat asking whether NEU members in sixth form colleges will be balloted alongside schools. Now this week, ballot opened for FE colleges for NEU members, and Newcastle sixth form college is part of that. But are you able to say more about sixth forms attached to schools? Because I'm guessing that the greater members of the public probably don't realise that schools, sixth forms in schools, are funded differently to FE colleges. So are you aware of anything?
Was the question, will the teachers within schools who are working within sixth form?
Well, Eileen's asking about sixth form colleges, but really I've expanded that to talk about sixth forms in schools as opposed to sixth form colleges that are separate to schools and FE colleges.
So they will be as part of a separate ballot, because as you say, they work under separate employment conditions as well. But our teacher members that are employed within a school as part of a sixth form will be balloted as part of the teacher ballot, and our sixth form college teachers will be balloted separately on a slightly different timetable for a variety of reasons.
I don't think most people realise that, and also I think people won't realise then that the pay in schools is very different to the pay in FE, and again it's very different to the pay in universities, that they're not all linked up. Steve, did you want to unmute, please?
Thanks. 2 seconds. Hi there. Apologies if I look a little bit rough. It's because I am. I was at with Bryan last night and played the Labour on his fiery hire. It was a local CAP from the Labour Party, where a number of trade unionists were there. I was there in a. Can you hear me? Okay. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Steve.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry about that. It must be my iPad. And it was just, as I say, there are Labour Party MPs, and indeed there was Jamie Driscoll, the mayor, who was there as well, Kate Osborne, to name another one, who have actually been out on picket lines, do support strikes, and of course there are those who don't. But I think it was important last night when we went there. There was a lot of trade unions from the FBU, the PCS, where we could all kind of get together and exchange information, very much as you're saying. And a lot of that can be done through local trades councils. Some of them are active, like ours is in Sunderland, others maybe less so. But I think it is important at times like this to make those links and to reassure those Labour councillors, not that there's very many, or Labour MPs who are actually going out on the picket lines and may face consequences, that we've got the backs, that we support them. And as I say, it went down really, really well. It's a great night. I've got a bad head, obviously, because there's a bit too much beer involved. But like I say, we made some great contacts and some great links. So for me, if it is possible for the NEU to affiliate local trades councils, even just to come down to the meetings, exchange information, there'll be a lot of support there. So it is about working together. That may be a conduit, a vehicle whereby that can be done. And I'll shut up now because my voice is going a little bit. But there are MPs who are out there, and I think we should be doing all we can to support them, particularly those in the Labour Party who are getting out there.
That's a really important point, Steve, actually, about affiliating to to the trades councils and being involved with them, or even not affiliating but meeting with them. So the SEA, we met with the local trades councils last year in order to talk about our shared issues, and so that people had a broader understanding of the issues going on right across education. And that means that they're then prepared for this action now and in supporting us. Joanna, would you mind if I brought you in? Because you come from a different perspective, having been a college leader. A few years ago, there was a campaign that was set up called Love Our Colleges. And the idea was that colleges were going to be more on the same page with the trade unions and campaigning for more funding. Do you think that there's more that employers can do?
Well,
lobbying and political activity.
Well, I suspect that there is. I am fairly long time retired now, and I'm not, in the heat of what's going on. But I think the big problem always was that actually colleges, in many ways, behave very independently of one another. They felt very competitive to one another. There's no love lost, for example, between New College Durham and Newcastle College Group and so on. And that is really a very bad basis for developing collaboration. There was some collaboration, but not a lot. And I imagine that if anything, it's probably only got worse, or people have got more removed from one another than they used to be, given the way funding has gone. But I do think it's important that there is collaboration. I like the conversation we're having where we're saying trade unions, education unions, we should be working with other unions. I think and not only we should be doing it, but we should be making it very public that we're doing it, because it's all very well if we talk to one another, but we actually need to get the message out to the wider public that, you take us on, you're also going to be taking on the CWU or the rail strike or what have you, and do that. I'm sorry, I'm not being very helpful in relation to your question, but I think it's certainly something if SEA can find any ways in which it can get college principals and people to talk more with one another on this front, it would be better. But they seem to be so, the employment arrangements at the moment, frankly, sound gruesome to me. So it's not gone any better in the last 10 years. It was one issue I wanted to raise with our speakers, and it's this attack. People attack us for going on strike or talking about going on strike, and they say how terrible it is, and it's and we're behaving illegally and so on. And I think people need to be reminded of what the basic human rights are now. But not as well as they were in the past, but how well we had to strike in order to get some basic human rights. And I think we do need to remind people that that's the case, because so often I find that when somebody comes up with an accusation like that, which is probably ill-founded, but it's there, nobody says anything. They just move on to the next subject. And I think we should keep on reminding people, well, there's so much now that we have, which are fundamental human rights, and we didn't get them by lying down and letting people walk all over us. We had to stand up very hard against it. And I think at the moment, I think that really needs quite a lot of reinforcing, because so many people don't know, have forgotten, etc., are totally ignorant of what the background is to our human rights now. End of rant.
That's great. John, Louise, did either of you want to come back on Joanna's points?
Yeah, I will do if that's okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I was smiling as you were talking because I was on the train the other day and people were moaning about a delay on the train and blaming it on train strikes. It had nothing to do with train strikes the day it fell. And I started kind of explaining that, and then somebody asked me what I did for a living, and I told them what I was doing, and then the conversation just went boom, and everybody just went back into looking at their books. They did not want to continue that conversation with me any longer. But no, I mean, you are absolutely correct, which is, you know, we're combating it all the time, but our message from the NEU is about, it's about funding for education widely. It's about value education, value educators. It's about the system has been starved of funding. It is about my pay. You know, because of the legislation, we have to strike around that. But actually, the wider message that we're trying to go to the public with is that it's actually about the fact that you've undervalued education across the board for far too long. And that's why we're striking, and it is a last resort. But it kind of links to what Steve was saying as well about the trades councils. I sit on the Carlisle District Trades Council on behalf of NEU. I'm also chair of the Cumbria Forum across the TUC, so I'm trying to kind of, and I will always encourage all of our districts to go along to the Trades Council if they don't already affiliate to them. And I think we have actually had motions through our executive, and we've written out to every district and asked them to. We can't force people to, however, but that getting that message out as well widely, which is, you know, meetings like this are really important. Meetings at the Trades Council are really important. I know when I've had motions to council, it's been people from the Trades Council who have turned up to support those in the public gallery, or I've had stalls in the centre of town around school funding previously, and it's people from the Trades Council again that have turned out to support those, to get those messages out to the wider public about what it is we're taking action for. And just about what you were saying about colleges dividing and conquering, you know, it's similar to what is happening in the school system as well, around that fragmentation of the system. It's a deliberate political act to divide us amongst workplaces, but also, you know, so that they can conquer us. And that's why it's so important that we work together across the movement and across different trade unions. And during the COVID safety issues, that was what was really important to us, that all of our guidance was coming out as joint guidance. It was badged with all the education unions badges on it, and it took us a lot of time to negotiate those and work those across the different unions. But it had more power because it came from joint unions. And you know, we are working very closely with them in this action going forward, but particularly the NAHT have been really good, because we have leadership members in the NEU, but the NAHT represent the majority of leadership members in primary sector. And they, you know, they will be informed. They came along to one of our Zoom calls for members, and their General Secretary basically said, we support your action. So where you've got members in workplaces who are nervous about taking action because of their leadership and what their leadership are going to say, if their leadership are saying to them, we support that action, that gives strength to the member in the workplace. So yeah, we are very keen to work with all education unions and across the movement with all of the unions as well. We are absolutely stronger when we work together. I firmly believe that.
Anya, I see Ian's got his hand up. I don't know if, I mean, I can speak after him if you want.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, well, I'm conscious I've spoken already. I wanted to raise another point if nobody else wants to come in. It was just that when Louise was talking about meeting with Bridget Phillipson, to some extent my my heart dropped to some extent, because you'll remember earlier this year James Whiting, the General Secretary of the SEA, came to speak to us. And he was firmly of the opinion, and I think we supported him, that we've got to reverse this appalling academisation process that's going on in our schools and get back to local democratic control. And of course, you will remember that before James came, we had the pleasure of Bridget Phillipson coming to speak to us at one of our meetings. And of course, she refused to give a commitment to doing precisely that. And I recall you saying, Anya, that you'd been at the Labour Party regional conference with her, and she'd spoke for 15 minutes and said nothing. So I'm not sure where that leaves us. I know it means that we've got to reinforce our activities. Now we wish people like Louise all the best of the luck in the world, I'm telling you.
Okay, thank you. John, did you want to come back?
Oh yeah, I'll just come in. I think you have to talk to everyone. You know, to be perfectly honest, I mean, however horrible they might be, you know, you have to talk to everyone. And I saw Louise's activity. I think it might have been on Twitter or one social media, you know, place where, you know, where she was at the Conservative Party conference, and I did kind of have to take a double take sometimes when I saw the comments. I think it was more like, well, where is she then if she's making these kind of like, oh, I had a good chat with such and such. But the more that you can talk to people, the better. You know, that's my view. You know, I recall when we took industrial action at Newcastle College, it just happened to coincide with a day when the Board of Governors were meeting. And that wasn't, you know, I'd like to say it was deliberate, but it wasn't. It just happened to kind of coincide because of the timing of it. And we made a decision to pick it outside, and we did it at 5 o'clock. There was dozens of us. We just, you know, got there, but we made a decision that myself, as a NATFE branch secretary and the Unison convener at the time, we just approached every governor who was coming in, shook their hand and gave them a leaflet and explained what we were doing. And I think for some of them that would have probably been the first time that they'd kind of engaged with anyone, you know, in taking industrial action. But, you know, and we were polite, but we were clear about what I mean, obviously knew that there was action taking place, but it's kind of more direct, you know, to them when you're in front of them. And I think the more that you can do that, you know, the better. You don't always have those opportunities, but when you do have those opportunities, you should take them. And the same way that Louise said about engaging with people, discussion about strike action. I think I think for me, one of the good things, I know that Mick Lynch has been a big talking point because he's been so good on the media, but one of the reasons I think he's been so good on the media is that he's just been fairly straightforward. He's not kind of, he doesn't kind of waffle around about the particular, you know, be political about it. He's just very straightforward. Well, this is a picket line. What do you expect? We're asking people not to go into work. This is what you do. These people aren't getting paid today. They're taking strike action. That's what you do. And there is a level of knowledge which isn't there amongst the general public, I would say, but I think that's changing. And you know, because once you kind of start to talking about people, if you say, well, do you really think that this should be a feudal society where you have absolutely no rights whatsoever and you don't have the right to withdraw your labour? You know, it's those sorts of kind of simple things that you can say to people, which I think is a way of trying to challenge that general narrative, you know, around things. Just one final thing on public support as well. I've been quite surprised at the level of horns being beeped outside Newcastle College where there's been strike action. You always get it, you know, you always get it. You get one or two, but there's been significantly more. You know, and there's been BT Openreach. I mean, just yesterday there was BT Openreach vans going past. Well, obviously they're taking strike action. Royal Mail vans going past. Well, they're taking action as well. But you know, even your kind of standard HGV drivers, other kind of big white vans as well, and cars. Far more kind of support, I think. And I'm not going to say this is the moment, comrades. Let's grasp it and everything else. But I think there is a different level of support and engagement from people than there has been, in recent times. And the more that we can kind of do that connecting up, like Enough is Enough, which had a big rally in Newcastle on last Saturday, the more that we can do that, the better. And I agree with the points that have been made about trades councils as well. I think the disappointing thing is sometimes is that you tell branches, you should affiliate to your local trades council, you should get involved. And often it takes industrial action or a particular protest to actually do that, which is a shame, because actually, you'd be far better placed, if you can get those things in place. And I know it's difficult to do that. Newcastle College, UCU are pretty certain are affiliated to Newcastle Trades Council. And I think that only came from when we took action 20 years ago. It wasn't the case before that. I mean, I remember going to one of their meetings and speaking about the industrial action. So the more that we can do that, the better. And just one very final thing, and then I will shut up, Anya, is that the thing about, Joanna talked about divide and conquer and different colleges kind of competing and what have you. And I think, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Some of them all know each other. They might have all used to work at, different institutions together. One of the things that clearly happens all the time is that staff move. You know, I have no idea how often it happens in schools, but definitely in colleges, people move from institution to institution. Now, sometimes that happens in terms of promotion. Other times it happens when the pay, you know, because the pay isn't the same across the piece, when pay just goes up in one particular, you know, college or one area. Sometimes, you know, you know, it might be that, you know, Teesside, the various colleges there all suddenly kind of like go up in salary. And it does shift, you know, so it does shift, you know, and, you know, the more that we can kind of bring people together, you know, in forums like this or through regional structures that unions have got, and the more that you're going to talk, because people move from one place to another. I recruited someone as a rep at a college where we were quite desperate for reps, to be perfectly honest, and then, you know, blow me, they've gone and got another job at another college. But I've already told, you know, the reps at the new college, get this person because they volunteered to come forward. So the more that we can do that, you know, the better. Thanks, Anya.
Thanks, John. If we go to concluding comments now, then, John, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I'll just say very, very quickly that the one lesson I think over the last couple of years, definitely, is don't assume you know what members are thinking in the organisations that you represent. You know, when the kind of shutdown first kind of came, we as a group of staff had an idea about what we thought the issues were. We surveyed members, and it wasn't totally different, but it was different. It was significant enough for us to think, bloody hell, we didn't think they were going to be the sorts of issues that our members in colleges and universities were going to be coming up with. And I think the closer that you can get to members, the better. Now, you can do that in various ways. You know, you can do it in branch meetings, you can do it in surveys or whatever it might be, or you can just do it by the standard talking to people. But I would think the key thing is, you know, don't assume you know what members think. Do what you can in order to communicate things. And also, you know, as Louise kind of said, you know, we try and do the right things and try and make the right judgment calls on a lot of this. Sometimes we might get it wrong. But the whole history of the trade union movement is about trying to do things differently and trying to get a result. And that's the key thing. It's not that one size fits all, because that just isn't the case at all. You have to kind of, I mean, I started off talking about the last 20 years. I could have gone back further, but it's about trying to think, right, what are the kind of appropriate things and the appropriate tactics to do at the time, and how best can we achieve our aims? And whatever leverage you can get with doing that, then you know, you need to use that sort of leverage. Thanks very much for inviting us here, Anya, and I've really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
That's great, John. Thank you. Louise, can I just come to you for your concluding comments, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think it just fits exactly with what John's saying there about sort of one size doesn't fit all. And I think I do need to defend myself slightly about some of these pictures and who I've been speaking to. You know, like, I did not take any pleasure in having a conversation with Jonathan Gullis. He was one of the most difficult people I've ever spoken to. However, I spoke about what it's like for a teacher in school and what, you know, what our wages are like. And he just talked nonsense. He talked over me, but I will hold him to account for what he said to me when I get to meet him again. And I will continue to have those conversations, because, like John said, it's about affecting change. It's about creating that change for the education sector and for our members as well. And you know, similarly with Bridget Phillipson, I mean, you're probably aware she got booed off of stage at our conference, at our national conference, because she was speaking about Ofsted and how they need to be reformed when we just launched a campaign around abolishing Ofsted. So, you know, she's not really reading the room around that one. But again, I will continue to have those. They're never going to agree to reversing the forced academisation process, which is why we need to be using everything that we can and every tool that we have in our box. And it does need to be from the grounds up, those campaigns, I think, which is why it was so useful for me to speak to so many Tory party members who are local councillors or school governors around, you know, thinking about the impact of that for the schools that they work with. And then just very briefly, I will just finish, John, you know, you referred to Mick Lynch a few times. He is absolutely fabulous, and I had seen that video this morning and I thought it was particularly good, his response this morning. But I will also say, you know, Joe Grady is brilliant and to the point as well, as is our General Secretary Mary Balstead, our Joint General Secretary Mary Balstead as well. And I think sometimes in the trade union movement there's a lot of these men who are fantastic orators and straight to the point, but we've got lots of great women as well within the movement that I think need to be shouted about as well. Thanks, Anya.
Thank you very much, Louise. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this part of the meeting to a close, and then we'll continue with our branch meeting. But I want to say thank you so much to both of you, to Louise, to John, for giving up your time and for being here this morning to talk with us. Thank you.